Dearest greetings, my Deadwood Rumblers. It's me, Man Sant, and today we're going to jump straight into the Kano deck overview so that I can get you to the gameplay as fast as possible because this is a pretty fun series. So quick reminder, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, please do so to stay up to date on all these best of 3 Levia videos that are going to be coming out, 22 in total. So the first thing to look at when we're playing against Kano is that this is really a fundamentally challenging matchup for Levia, and that's because Kano is going to be slinging arcane damage at you, and arcane damage is something that you have to pitch cards to avoid taking damage from, rather than blocking with cards. And the big issue with that is that when you block with cards, these cards go to grave, which Levia wants to pay for her attacks. But when you pitch cards, they're going to go back into your deck, so you don't get that kind of easy game plan flow of just blocking with cards, swinging with cards, and maintaining tempo in that fashion. Instead, you do have to change your game plan quite a bit. So the other thing to mention on Kano's side is that Kano is also a deck that deals very multiplicative damage. And this is why Kano is so strong when there's a lot of aggro decks in the meta, because they tend to not be able to block arcane damage very well because they don't run a lot of blues. But when Kano lands a very strong attack on you, then it can unlock potentially even larger damage with cards like Blazing Aether. So you don't necessarily ever want Kano to just be able to slam you with a really big front-loaded amount of damage, because that will lead to more damage down the line. So if we look at on the Levia side what we can do against that, this Levia deck is actually teched pretty well to handle the problem that you don't get to block, and that's because cards like Sigil of Solace, Howl from Beyond, Ghostly Visits, and cards like Deadwood Rumbler and the Barraging Beatdowns all can be played without having cards in Banish previously. So there are enough cards in deck for you to actually find and fill up the graveyard to about 3, which is what you want to then present really good swing damage turns onto Kano. And the cool part about playing against Kano for the Levia side is that when you find cards like Bloodrush Bellow normally is going to present around 18 damage, which is of course larger than Kano's health total of 15. So both decks actually can be very explosive into each other, but you are faced with the difficulty of not really having the ability to swing with big attacks each turn. Instead, you have maybe 2 turns per game where you can actually swing at these big attacks, because these games versus Kano tend to just be over very quickly. This can be because either Kano whiffs on some lethal play, or you just don't draw a lot of blues and get really punished for an all-red hand. These are both scenarios that can play out, so that's why I think playing best of 3s can give you a really good feel for how the matches can go, rather than just one high roll or another. So for our equipment in this matchup, we're going to take Skullhorn, which has Arcane Barrier 2, which is fantastic because of course we want to hit that Null Rune 3 total, or the Arcane Barrier 3 total, which Null Rune Gloves can provide us. And then I choose to run Spell Flurry Cloak as the chess piece because this gives you that ability to fill Graveyard with more cards. And this can also prevent some of those hit effects that Kano can have on his cards that can really turn into that multiplicative damage. And then for the last piece, I also run Hooves of the Shadow Beast because this is another card that can just present a lot of lethal damage on the Kano opponent, and it does fill grave as well. So all these are ways to help this matchup. The more of those 0-cost cards you run, the better. You just dump them in grave and start playing the game like you want. But this matchup takes a lot of practice, because the other problem against Kano is that when you commit a lot of your own blues to playing cards rather than holding them to block the Arcane Barrier, when you get to 0 cards in hand with no pitch floating, Kano can really start to just do math uninterrupted and abuse the fact that he knows that you cannot soak any more damage. So just things to keep in mind. Let's see how the best of 3 went. Alrighty, welcome everybody to the best of 3 portion of the video today. So on the left, we actually have a different Tom, different from the opponent that was featured in the Ira and Dorinthia videos. There are 2 Toms locally. Of course, I'm on the right here playing Levia, and this is a matchup that is more stressful than it is fun, but sometimes you get it really ahead of the game, and it can just be fun to punch down some Kanos. So game 1 here, I actually did win the die roll, and I decided to go second, and that's because if you go first and you don't have a hand that can do anything more than just like swing claws, Kano can just block 1 card on that claw swing and then dump the rest of his hand for free damage into you, free Kanos, and then he just gets to redraw up anyway. So going first is just questionable. They can get off some cheese damage, and cheese damage definitely hurts. Whereas if the Kano player goes first, they're going to spend their cards dealing damage into you, and then you can more, I guess, knowledgeably pitch your hand into the Arcane Barrier and try to craft a better hand for going second here. Dig for the cards that are playable without a graveyard set up. So unfortunately, Kano here is going to be coming in with enough damage that I can't block. That is a Voltic Bolt pumped with the Crucible of Aetherweave. So that does bring it up to 6. And 6 I can't cover up with only 3 Null Rune, but I am going to do a little bit cheeky play. Gotta dig a little bit more for playable cards. So I'm going to pitch a red, then a blue into my Null Rune 3 so that I can dig a bit more. And I'm doing that because I want to find cards that are playable right now, right? So looks like in my hand I've got 3 reds and a blue. The Howl from Beyond, the red Barraging, Endless Maw, and then I think it's a Deadwood for pitch. So playing with the Barraging here, I love playing these cards against Kano because it makes their turn very difficult to plan out because they are all of a sudden being confronted with a, something that is going to affect their hand. And Kano's hand is always something they need to be super delicate about. There's normally just a correct line of what should be played, what should be pitched, and what should be blocked with. So if you mess with that, it can really impede their ability to do anything that you just can't tank through damage-wise. So the Barraging is going to come through. He did respond to it with Kano by pitching the Energy Potion, just getting a non-block out of his hand. So good play there, just making sure that didn't stick around. So then, yep, with that blue Deadwood, I'm just going to come in with a Claw Swing, and the Claw Barraging combo is really strong early game because it is a really low commitment play. I've only committed the Barraging Beatdown here to potentially deal 7 damage. Now, if Tom commits 2 cards into blocking this, I'm normally very, very okay with that. Taking cards out of a Kano player's hand is just saving your life to a major degree. So he's going to take the damage. I love seeing that. But from Tom's side, we can see that he did have the Nourishing Emptiness, so he's just lining up his hand to play the Nourishing. Now, I do think he probably should have just blocked with his Aether, or with that, I believe it was a Stir that he pitched to play the Aether, but that card probably should have just gone to blocking because I had floating anyway to soak the blue Aether Flare, so little mistake. But his turn is still going to be the Nourishing, which is what he wanted. And this is one of the more frustrating parts with taking an equipment suite like this, is that you can't actually block the Nourishing. Now, you can get a little bit of block value from the hooves and, of course, defense reactions if you have them, but you can't actually stop the hit effect unless you had a defense reaction in Arsenal, which I just would not recommend doing. So when they get this hit off, normally the 5-card hand is going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. The alternatives there would be to run like Barkbone Strapping instead of the Spell Void chest piece, and then just have a defense reaction and plus those 2 blocking equipment can cover the 6. Or you can run Husk instead, but a lot of Kanos don't even run the Nourishing because it is a whiff when they use their Kano ability. So you just don't always know what the Kano player is going to do deck building wise, whether they run Nourishing or not. So I prefer to just take this equipment suite because it's decent against both versions. So what we see there, I do block what I can with the Sink. However, with that Sink below, I actually sunk a Writhing Beast Hulk. I hope that was on camera. I remember this from the game. I sunk a Writhing Beast Hulk and drew into an Endless Maw. So by doing that, I've now made my hand more expensive. And I've also dug towards a card that actually cares about having a 6 in graveyard for like a true hit, or I guess added effect. The Writhing Beast Hulk hitting Dominate is really not that important until later in the game, but the Endless Maw, of course, costs 3 because it should be a 9. It shouldn't just come in for 6. So by digging towards that Endless Maw, I've put myself in a bit of a pickle here because now when I pitch and play the Endless Maw, my graveyard is not set up with a 6. It only has 3 cards that allow me to play it, but none of them are 6s. So it is only coming in for 9 because I played the Howl as well. And I only have the 1 pitch floating. Whereas if I had kept that Writhing Beast Hulk, right, it would be coming in for 9 as well. I'd have 2 pitch floating, which is better for being able to soak damage that Kano's throwing back in me. So I do think that sync was just not necessary. There was just nothing I was really digging for. I had the attack I wanted. But my general rule tends to be sync or opt your way closer to blood rushes, and I think going into this game, that's just the linear plan I had. But, you know, you do have to be more adaptive than that. There's not really many heuristics that work when you're talking about Levia. She's just very, very contextual. So Tom on the left is actually using the Cracked Bauble as a proxy for Eye of Ophidia because I'm using my Eye of Ophidia, so don't own two of those. Because the way it works, I build these decks, pass them out to my friends so they can get a few reps in, and then we record some games. So all the cards in both decks are mine. So he's thinking about his line here because my hand is just on full display. I have nothing in hand, nothing in arsenal. I just have very apparent 9 damage coming in with only 1 resource floating. So if Tom just does his math, he should determine whether or not he wins on this turn. So with that Eye of Ophidia, he banished the Forked Lightning. Forked Lightning is one of the better cards to just be able to present lethal out of nowhere. And you can't actually see the Forked Lightning because the hand cams are covering it up, but promise you, it's there. Got to get better about that in the future. If he just put it in the banish zone like he's supposed to, it would be on screen. Also, quick note, the lighting that I have set up for the next slew of videos did not come in time for these, so we do see that these were filmed in relatively low light, but I was trying to get rid of what glare I could, so apologies for that. But we see Kano now coming in with Forked, and gosh, this is just such value when they pump it with the Crucible and the Metacarpus. That is a total of 4 damage buffs on the Forked because of how the text reads, where it will deal 2 plus 2, and then 2 plus 2. And I only get 1 chance to block any of that with Norrin. So he's coming in for 8, and all I can do is block 2 of it, so I take 6. Right? Whereas if I had the 1 more floating by going the Writhing Beast Hulk line, I would have been able to only take 5. So keep that in mind for what happens next. So he's then going to Storm Striders. Lets him play his next attack as an instant here. And he's going to play the Chain Lightning. So Chain Lightning lets his next thing be an instant, and it will deal +3 because he's played another wizard non-attack. So there he goes. Now he gets to play another thing as an instant, and he's dealt now 9 total, and the Blazing Aether will deal X damage based on what has been taken. So it is coming in for 10 total because of the buff. So that is just gross lethal. But if you think about that, if I'd taken 1 less damage, then it doesn't really change the outcome of the game there. But it's just things to think about. If the lethal math is even tighter than that, you want to just make sure you're playing attacks that don't just take your entire resource base because you need to soak what damage you can. Otherwise, the Kano damage is multiplicative, as we saw. So that was a loss in game 1. So we jump into game 2. So I get to choose who goes first here. And I'm actually deciding, you know what? I actually have faith in my deck. I would like to go first because I have built my deck to have pretty good turn 1s. And sure enough, going first here, I've got the Red Deadwood. Red Deadwood, an amazing card going first here, but I am a little punished on that random draw discard. I had a Ghostly Visit in hand, and of course was hoping to discard the Ghostly Visit. Instead, I discard a 6, and of course that 6 has Blood Debt, and I'm forced to banish it. So that is working against me, unfortunately, but coming in for 8 immediately is pretty good, pretty decent. So Tom falling into the Kano trap of my hand can deal damage. I think I would like to deal damage with it instead of just deciding to block. And we'll say Tom is still getting his groundwork done for Kano. He's quite good playing it locally, but he definitely tends to be a more aggressive Kano player and will just go for lines where he hopes that lethal can be found on that last card. It's not the way I would play Kano. But he does it to pretty decent success. So he is probably going for the damage route instead of the blocking route, just by nature of the player. So, yep, sure enough, he is trying to set up that Kano. He will probably zap for damage. I do have a little bit floating, but that last card in hand is a red, so I don't get to just soak everything, unfortunately. So there we go. He is coming in for, I believe that's 4 total. Yep. And, oops, I may have forgotten to soak something with Nullrun. But actually, Sonic Boom is going to let him cast the next thing for cheaper anyway. So there is going to be another effect coming in. But either way, I should have used my Arcane Barrier on the first hit, just in case the next hit was something like Blazing Aether. So, oof, he's coming in for 6 already on turn 1. I mean, he chose the damage route, and he definitely had a ton of damage to present. So, okay, good. Remembering there, soaking 1 of it. Taking 5, though. God, I took 9 damage total, and it's my turn 1. His turn 0. It's disgusting. But at least I've swung back into him. I've set up my graveyard on its way, at least. I basically have what I need to start setting up graveyard because I've got the Ghostly, which is another thing that can get to grave. I've got the Spell Void, which is another thing to get to grave, so I am pretty close. So then we go into Tom's real turn 1. And this is when Kano can just get really scary. His clock can just be ridiculous. If he gets a turn 1 off like that, and then it's his turn, or a turn 0 off like that rather, and then it's his turn 1, and he can just dump a ton of damage into you, and then lethal you on your turn 2 because he uses Storm Striders. Jeez, that's just like the ultimate high roll, but that doesn't always happen, especially because it normally means Kano's playing without an arsenal, without Tunic up. So he'd have to really get lucky for that to happen. So instead, he's just coming in for 6 with that Voltic Bolt. And I do have some nice blues in hand. I've got that Doomsday, which of course can't be played this early and probably just never played in this matchup, which is unfortunate because it would be an amazing card in this matchup. But you can't cast it because you will probably never play a long enough game to have 6 Blood Debt cards in the Banish Zone. So Ghostly Visit and Arsenal, I definitely want to play that, but when he presents a tall attack like this, I can't use as many cards as I want to probably pitch into Nullrun, whereas I could if he spread it across like 2 attacks, right? So then he's got the action point still and is going to play the Energy Potion. So Tom is looking very, very set up. Unfortunately, with that Fate Foreseen, it's really not going to do much. I just have to use my hand to do something piddly here, play the Ghostly Visit, but I do need that engraved, so might as well get it there. It is not lethal presented, which I wish I could do when he's only at 7, but that is not the hand at the moment. I do have a Blood Rush, so ideally, if he lets me keep that for some reason, if I can set that up in Arsenal, I'm looking at potentially winning the game next turn. But if he presents any kind of damage here, I really should sink my hand into blocking it, because I'm in the spot where there's no way I survive another turn cycle. Yep, so there he goes with the Stir. Next thing is going to deal +3. And, Gaze is such a good card. It's playable, and then it bounces back, and then it's Blue Pitch. That card is everything Kano wants. So, looks like he's going to bottom the Snapback and put the Aether Spindle on top. And Aether Spindle is going to present a really strong opt effect here. So, let's see. He's going to go ahead and pay for the Aether Spindle here. It is coming in for 7 total because it's been buffed by the Stir. Now, of course, I want to take as little of this as possible, but interestingly, looks like I only pitched the Blood Rush. I could have pitched that Fate Foreseen to cover up one more. Interesting. I wonder what the thought is there. Huh. Okay, so I blocked 3, took 4, so he gets to opt basically an entire hand here. But I don't believe that was correct. I should have denied at least one more with that Fate. If I arsenal that Fate, I'm going to be mad with myself. we actually played 2 best of 3s because we had some very unfun non-games in the first best of 3. I did win, but it was not quality stuff, so we had to replay it. So forgive me, I don't remember everything that happened here. So he's going to take 4. And I take a blood debt tick. It's unfortunate. So we're both at 3. Interesting. So I arsenaled the Fate first scene? Am I really that scared of nourishing because of the last game? I would not recommend this. Don't do this. Alright, so because he used his entire hand on my own turn, I know that he just draws up passes and is basically forced to present lethal on his Storm Striders, which, I mean, it's super likely that he could. I only have 3 life. So he also has the energy potion up, so odds are just not in my favor here. I believe I have at least 2 blues. But my graveyard is set up exactly as I'd like it in these kind of positions. It's what I mentioned earlier with having exactly the ghostly Deadwood Spell Void being how I hit 3 in graveyard. So now the Dread Screamer is really, really rewarding here. Because now I've got exactly what I want to be able to deal 10 off of a Dread Screamer and a blue. And everything else in my hand can go to pitching. So as long as he doesn't present anything too tall, I should be fine. So Tom, looking at his hand, he's got Blazing Aether, which is actually not always the best here, because it deals damage based on what has already been dealt. And obviously with my life, I'm going to prevent everything I can. So he's going to come in for 5 on that snapback. I'm going to block 3, take 2. And of course, I'm terrified here. But all he's got in hand because of those blues is actually to play the Blazing Aether. And that's only going to come in for 3. Because... yeah, he's only coming in for 3 there. And I can block 3. Even with 2 other reds in hand, yeah, I survive. So I guess his last play here is to try to set up something on top with that 1 floating and energy potion. He can Kano for like a 0 cost because I'm completely out. So that's his last bet here. But from what he sees, it's not there. He's got a YOLO. Here we go. And it's a Voltic. Ooh, Voltic is fantastic, but he doesn't have the mana to pay for it. So that is a win, but very, very tight game. And this is how Kano goes, right? It's so quick. He either has the lethal or he doesn't, because normally these games are like 3 turns. So now since I won that one, Tom gets the choice here. Yep, and it looks like he actually chose me to go first because, yep, these are things that can just happen. I don't have great turn 1 plays, and it's just a claw. So that is exactly it. It also looks like I'm holding that blue in hand, being cheeky. I pitched 2 reds to perhaps make him think that he can push a lot more damage than he can. So he is going to block, and then let's see what kind of value he gets at the end of my turn. Centering Foresight, amazing card. Lets him opt 3, and next thing will deal +1. So he gets to craft the best turn 1 hand he can. So he's got the Forked Lightning. Gosh, that's just so much obscene damage. Oh, but he doesn't have the blues in hand to pay for anything off the top here. So both of us didn't have ideal turn 1 stuff. I'm going to keep the blue in hand, that Dread Screamer, and instead arsenal the red that I had, I believe is a Boneyard Marauder, which is fantastic. That card is just setting me up to basically draw Blood Rush Bellow, and I'm set. Because the beautiful thing about Blood Rush Bellow is that even if you have 0 cards in grave going into the Blood Rush Bellow, Blood Rush is going to go to grave, a 6 power is going to go to grave, and then you can always just toss the Spell Void into grave as well. So that can set you up with 3 immediately. So basically, as early as you see that Blood Rush, even like turn 2, you can just go crazy with it. I love that the Spell Void sets that up. Because you'll never miss, right? You're going to have discarded a 6 because of the Blood Rush. So the other 2 can be misses. It does not matter. Oh, and then on Tom's turn, forgot to mention it, but all we saw him do was play an Energy Potion, set up Arsenal, and pass. So then when it passes back to me, I've got this Barraging. Once again, as we saw in Game 1, Barraging can make Kano make some tough decisions right off the bat. And I do think most of the time it is just correct for the Kano to commit to just blocking if the Barraging comes through, because Kano has such a delicate life threshold that you really just can't leak damage. But Tom deciding that when he has the Forked Lightning, he's going to go ahead and push as much as he can. So I still take an obscene amount of damage from that. I do take 9. There's just not much you can do against Forked Lightning. It is one of the best cards Kano has, and it's one of the reasons you actually can't just try to fatigue Kano out, because they can set up double Forked Lightning turns by pitch stacking that no deck can block out in Blitz. They just deal a lot more damage than your health pool can handle. So then my turn just becomes soaking what I can, pitching into playing a Beast Within to set up my graveyard. So I was coming in for 10 damage total, which was significant. I mean, now we're just seeing that Kano line where he's basically forced to draw, pass, and hope that he has lethal back into me on my turn, because I've got everything set up. I have not even used my Spell Void yet. I haven't used my Hooves. I have the Boneyard Martyr and Arsenal. I'm set up very well this game. I'm not really playing that loose. I'm not playing off the top. I feel very comfortable. So then the discussion here, we were talking about the Talismanic Lens and whether or not he should use it to fix his draws, and I'm telling him, no, Tom. Please wait on that. Save it for when lethal is on the line. So then we go into my turn, and this is everything I've ever wanted set up. I'm able to burn that non-6 out of my hand because it's the Sigil. So that's just fantastic. Cushioning my life. It's another fantastic card against Kano, right? It just heals you 3. So it's basically the same as like a blue in this matchup. It's really good. So then he's responding to the Blood Rush if he'd like. And now using that Talismanic Lens. Use it when lethal's on board, which of course lethal's gonna most likely come through here, because I've got the low end Blood Rush turn of 18 damage set up as long as I draw a blue. Because I've got the 2 floating, I've got the next Mandible Claw to then follow up the Boneyard. That is 18 damage. So Tom should know this. His partner plays quite a bit of Levia. I've been helping her out quite a bit. So he's got to do what he can. But he could also wait a bit and wait for me to draw. Perhaps I don't draw blues and he can go for lethal then. Or the call of going aggressive now is that I only have the 2 pitch floating. So in theory, if he could deal... he'd have to deal 17 at least, because I have the Spell Void and 2 floating. If he can deal 17 all on the stack here before the Blood Rush resolves, I mean, sure, that's a win condition. Now, that is a tall order for a Kano that has not opted a huge amount or anything. But, what did I say? Opt's coming through. He's going to do what he can. Looks like he's got the Blazing and the Gaze. Chain Lightning and Snapback, I believe is his hand. So actually pretty potent turn, but of course it's missing Forked Lightning. Forked Lightning would just be... Gosh, Forked Lightning combo with Blazing Aether, I mean, that is a disgusting turn. And that's what could do it. But not what he has. So it's these moments as the Kano player where I just really never want to play this hero, because it feels like there's just the objectively correct line every turn as the Kano player. And if you don't play that line correctly, you're you're just actually wrong. You can't really talk through the reason why your line was better. Kano has just been like solved down to a science. And I like it when heroes have more preference. Because as we've seen with Tom, I think there were a couple cards he probably, or hands rather, where he played aggressive when it should have been a block turn. And we will see if that punishes the outcome. He did win one. I did win the second. But then this game is on the line. Who wins the best of three? That was actually the first loss I took in the best of three series so far. I really want to take more losses. I'm not here to tell you that Levia is the best deck in Blitz, but I'm here to tell you that when you play Levia a ton and you get really comfortable with her and you just know what you're doing better than your opponent does, you normally are in the driver's seat for more games. And driver's seat equals wins. So here's the play. It's everything I want. I even double drew blues, so I was able to soak a bit when he did come in for damage. And, oh yeah. I mean, he's hoping I just don't have that last attack. But as we know from like turn 2, I did have it. So, oof, what a series. Like I said, this is actually our second best of 3 that we played. And I did win them both, but let me tell you, really good Kanos always make you sweat. So hope you guys enjoyed, and we've got Briar coming next.